Hello, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be reacting to my 5-star predictions from 2022. I ended up putting that list together last year because I was really hoping to work through some of my physical TBR and to read more of the books that I owned. So I had, I would say, kind of a challenging time putting that list together, but I really hoped and wished that a lot of those would be 5-star books for me, 5-star reads, because obviously the intent when you buy a book is that you're going to really enjoy it, right? But my tastes have changed so much over time that I didn't fully expect to absolutely adore all of those books, and that was definitely the case. I feel like I had very mixed results with some of the books that I read to complete the challenge for that video. But in this one, I'm going to let you know my thoughts and feelings on those books and let you know if they worked out for me or not. I don't have any notes really prepared for this video. I didn't have notes prepared either for the last time I did a video like this, and it worked out okay, so hopefully this one will as well. But before we get into that, I would like to thank the sponsor of today's video and let you know a little bit about Birch Living. Birch Living is a premium mattress in a box company that makes mattresses and sleep products that are stylish, comfortable, and environmentally conscious. Their non-toxic mattresses are made right here in America and are crafted with organic and natural materials that have been sustainably sourced. It was important for me to pick a birch mattress that is made with natural and organic materials because unlike synthetic mattresses, the wool in these mattresses makes them hypoallergenic. And I personally have pretty bad allergies, and I've noticed sometimes that when I sleep, I wake up sneezing, and these mattresses are allergen resistant and mold resistant. In addition to being a better mattress for me, Birch is committed to being better for the planet. My mattress is not releasing dangerous emissions into the air because it's guaranteed to be free of harmful chemicals. That's something that I immediately noticed when I opened up the box and opened up the plastic on this mattress. I didn't experience any of that really strong chemical scent you often get whenever you open up a new mattress. It was really refreshing, honestly. I ordered the Birch Luxe mattress, which is a premium upgrade to their original well-loved Birch Natural mattress. I've had my Birch mattress at this point for about 2 months, and I absolutely love it. What I like most is how well I sleep on this mattress. It is so comfortable, especially compared to my old mattress. The old one I recently got rid of, and I am not looking back. I just stripped this bed to wash the sheets, and I can't stress enough how comfortable this bed is. I don't want to get up. I don't want to edit this video. I just want to sit here forever. Also, with your Birch mattress, you get a 100-day sleep trial and a 25-year warranty. If it makes you nervous to buy something that you have never tried out before, you get more than 3 months to make sure that this is the mattress for you and that you absolutely love it. And if you don't love it, they'll pick it up for you and you'll get a full refund. And the best part about all of this is that Birch delivers your mattress straight to your door for free within the US. Also, each mattress comes with 2 of their EcoRest pillows, which are made of recycled plastic bottles, making them super breathable and better for the environment. I love my Birch Luxe mattress, and I personally think you would too. If you're looking for a new bed, you need to check out Birch. And click the link below or go to birchliving.com/Chandler to get $400 off your mattress plus 2 free pillows. Thanks again to Birch Living for sponsoring this portion of today's video. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about the 22 books that I read this year as 5-star predictions. It was a mixed bag, which we'll see here, or I guess here. Okay, first up we have Not Quite a Lady. This is a book that I actually finished last night. It was the last book that I had to complete for this video. All of these I physically own, by the way. They're just in various different spots in my house, and I didn't really want to go and scrounge them up. So, book cover right here. Not Quite a Lady is by Loretta Chase. I really love Loretta Chase's stuff. She is a historical romance author who historically has worked pretty well for me in the past. Get it? Historically worked for me. This story was interesting. It's about our heroine, who I can't remember the name of, even though I read this book last night. She is having a baby at the beginning of the story. She's like 17. She kind of got herself into a tricky situation being a lady of the ton. She's not really supposed to sleep with men out of wedlock, obviously, so she has to give her infant child. She's really upset about this, right? She's not excited about it, and this is something that kind of plagues her into her adulthood. So we fast forward to when she's 27, and she is unmarried at this point. She's not told her father that she had a baby out of wedlock, but her stepmother is very much aware of it and helped her kind of conceal her pregnancy. She doesn't want to tell her dad because she's really close with him, and she knows that it would totally crush him to know that, you know, she had relations with someone outside of wedlock. I think he would think it was a personal failing or something like that. Anyway, she's very much keeping this to herself, which becomes challenging when she has a new next door neighbor who shows interest in her. This book's very much about their relationship and about him coming to know and accept the fact that she had a child and, you know, was physically intimate with someone before she was physically intimate with him. It was a very tame romance. I figured that this was going to be very juicy and very OTT because of the plot of the book, but honestly, it wasn't. It was very tame. Whenever our heroine tells the hero, hey, I have a child, he's like, okay. And if anything, he's very sympathetic to her plight, which I really like. I didn't really want him to react negatively or poorly to it. it, but also it made for like very little in the way of conflict in this book. There is kind of like a moment where the child goes missing, I think, and they have to find him and retrieve him. But other than that, this book was very low stakes. I mean, I guess the smutty scenes were kind of nice if you want a book with a fair amount of smutty scenes. I think there were like 2 or 3 pretty, not early on in the book, but definitely before these two officially like say they're in love or like, you know, are going to get married. So I don't know, maybe if that's something that strikes your fancy, this would be for you. This was just a 3-star read. Like, I love the run to chase, and I did like the initial interactions between hero and heroine. They are kind of like fun. The lack of conflict, I think, made this very low angst for me. And then also the language usage here was not something that I personally really loved. Words for certain body parts that just weren't to my liking. The hero in this book is really into animals. Like, he knows a lot about them. He writes pamphlets on like best practices for treating your farm animals well. And so he refers to his parts as he would a farm animal. It wasn't personally my fave. This book was fine, but it was definitely just a 3-star read for me, which is kind of a sad thing because I like Loretta Chase, but I do have other books to read by her this year. So maybe I'll find a 5-star there. But moving on, The Lies of Locke, Lamora. This is a book that I also attempted to read this week. I ended up soft DNFing this book, and for me that means that I will maybe revisit it at a later date. I have no intentions of unhauling it, but it just didn't appeal to me in the moment. I actually picked up the audiobook of this one because I just wasn't feeling reading it physically, and the reviews for the audiobook were like super great. I don't know, like listening to this at 3 times speed definitely is not doable for me because it's fantasy, first of all, and also just the narrator's accent I think doesn't lend itself well to speeding this up to like, you know, chipmunk speed like I like. This one is about our main character Locke, I think, and he being sold, I guess, at the beginning of the story because of his talents or something like that. I think he is going to learn how to be a thief. That's all I really know. The beginning of the story was fun, like the banter and the like humor and hijinks I liked. I will be honest, I just like was not in the mood to finish this one, so I'm putting it on pause for now. I have heard so many good things about this book, so I do intend to read it eventually, and I have a special edition copy of the book. That's the cover that is right here, but I don't feel bad about not finishing this one this year. A book that I, again, read this week. I think all of the first books on this list are ones that I have read most recently, so that's gonna probably bode well for us because fresh thoughts, fresh memes, I can better tell you about these books. But I read Becoming by Michelle Obama. This is a book that I know a lot of people really enjoyed, and so I picked it up because I like Michelle Obama and I wanted to read it and experience it for myself. I will say, going into this, I was like tentatively interested in it. I think Michelle Obama is an interesting person, but I didn't expect it to be what it was, and what it was fantastic. The way that this book is written, it's both very grand in scope and also very intimate because Michelle takes you from her childhood and kind of her thoughts about growing up all the way through Barack's presidency in such a way that makes you really sympathize with her and also understand what it must be like to live a life like this. And honestly, not only was it fascinating, it was just a joy to read. I mean, it was very well written. I listened to this audiobook for almost an entire day. It's a very long book, but I loved it. It was narrated by her. I would definitely recommend picking the audiobook up if you are an audiobook listener. I have no complaints about this book. It is nonfiction. I do always hesitate to rate people's life experiences, but for some reason this book I feel less bad about rating, if that makes sense, simply because there's a lot of care taken with actual writing of this book. It wasn't a book that I was judging purely based on someone's life experiences, unlike whether or not I wanted to learn about them. It was because the writing of this book is so good. If I were to rate this, which I don't know if I will on Goodreads, I haven't decided yet, it would definitely be a 5-star book. This was absolutely fantastic, and I think it deserves all of the praise that it gets. All right, next up we have Little Women, and I ended up putting this book on the list because the 1994 adaptation of Little Women is, I believe, my most watched movie of all time. Watched that movie every time I was sick. From like 2nd or 3rd grade on, like stayed homesick from school, I would always watch Little Women, or the 80s Anne of Green Gables miniseries adaptation. Loved that one. Little Women has been a formative part of my adolescence growing up experience. I had never read the book, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna read it this year and see how I feel about it. And honestly, I don't know, I have mixed feelings about this one. I enjoyed it certainly because I really enjoy the story, but I will say I think something I'm learning this year is that I really don't care about the books for a lot of like historical stories, right? Like, I read Emma this year for a video that I actually just posted. If you haven't seen that, I'll link it in the description. And while it was my favorite Austen book that I read, I still really prefer the like 2020 adaptation of it. I think like whatever adaptation you watch first will probably end up sticking with you and being your favorite. And frankly, like, I think some stories, especially older stories, are just better in terms of seeing them on a screen rather than reading them. I think you can relate more to the characters because you can actually see them and you can actually feel the emotion. I just feel like it's harder sometimes to kind of read the emotion on the page. Little Women definitely had more emotion, I would say, than Emma, but I still prefer the movie. And I know know that's blasphemous to say, but I've always been a movie girl, frankly. I'm not someone who likes to nitpick on the little things that are or are not included in adaptations of shows. Even if I loved the book first, I don't really care if the like movie or the show is identical. So I think like maybe that is just me. And that's interesting too, because I don't even like movies that much. But Woman was good. I'm still gonna give it 5 stars because I like the story so much, but I do actually think that I prefer adaptation because I think that it relies a little bit less on the sort of like moralistic components and relies more on like the emotion, and I prefer that. Moving on. Oh, speaking of Emma, I did read Emma for my Jane Austen adaptations video that I did. I liked this one the most out of the 3 books that I read. I think I read Persuasion and Sense and Sensibility as well. I liked Emma. I thought it was a good book. Was it my favorite thing ever? Was it a 5-star read? No. I don't think I really said what Little Women is about, and I don't really want to get into the details about Emma because it's like these books have been around for hundreds of years and surely we know what they're about, but Emma is about kind of like a slightly spoiled, very intelligent, and sometimes stupid in terms of how she deals with people, woman in like Regency England. It's about her trying to like matchmake and kind of failing in it at times and then ending up with her own like happily ever after. I mean, it was a good story. I liked it. I think what I don't love about Jane Austen stories is there's not a closeness to the characters that I am familiar with, I guess, or that I am comfortable with in a romance. These are, I guess, technically romances, but I don't feel like we get enough of the internal dialogue of like hero and heroine to really root for them. I mean, I did root for Emma to get with Knightley, but I was just kind of like, I still feel like I would rather see this on the screen. I would still rather see these like tentative glances and touches rather than like trying to read on page Knightley was scolding Emma. Like that's all I kind of got from the book, but like in the movie you get to see like how he actually likes her beyond just the scolding. So I was like, I'm gonna put it like a 3.5 or 4-star read, not a 5-star sadly, but glad that I got to dive into some Jane Austen this year, because I think otherwise if I had not forced myself to read Emma and some of these other books, I probably would never read Austen because it just is not a high priority for me. But now I can say I've read it, I've been there, I've done that. A book that I did give 5 stars to was No Exit. I had kind of gone back and forth for a little while on whether or not I wanted to give this book 5 stars because I don't know, it's a thriller and I feel like it takes a lot for a thriller to impress me. But when I think on books, I try to think, is there anything I would improve or anything that I wanted changed? And frankly, there wasn't anything that I would have changed. No Exit. This is a thriller about a woman who is stuck at a rest stop with a few different people, and she realizes that there is a young girl in the back of one of the vehicles of some of the people at the rest stop. So she's trying to figure out, has this kid in their back seat, where does she belong? Like, who does this child belong to? And can she help this child? And it was so good. It felt so isolated, so chilling because it's set kind of during the snowy winter time. It was so good. Ate this up, and if you want something that feels edge of your seat the entire time you're reading, I think that you would really enjoy this book if you haven't read it already. I think there's an adaptation too for like Hulu or something, which I'm definitely tempted to watch, and I'm kind of deciding whether or not I want to watch it with Hayden because I kind of want him to read the book first. But anyway, this was a 5-star read. I really enjoyed it, and it's probably, I'm gonna say it's probably my favorite thriller this year besides Killers of a Certain Age, which is kind of a different book altogether, like in terms of whether it's a thriller or not. But anyway, No Exit was fantastic. Next up, we have the first of the books that I don't remember much about. I'm gonna be honest with you. We have The Girl with the Red Balloon. I remember this book in terms of like the general themes, but I don't really remember much about my feelings on this book. So I know that it wasn't a 5-star. So this one's about our main character, Ellie. She is going to Germany on a high school trip. Her grandfather, I think, asks her like not to go. I think because of some of his trauma or his ideas about Germany. I think he grew up there. Ellie ends up going to Germany and ends up being transported back to the 80s when the Berlin Wall was still constructed, and she gets to interact with people who were living during that time, and she learns a lot, and we learn a lot about like racism, xenophobia, eugenics, like a lot of different hard-hitting topics. It's definitely not a fun read, but it definitely is an important read. My issue with it, and I don't even know that's an issue, is that it's a YA book, which tends just not to be for me typically anymore, and also I just didn't feel super connected with the characters. It wasn't that Ellie was a bad main character or anything, but I felt like she was someone that you were supposed to just like step into her shoes and view the story from her point of view, and I think that made for a slightly less compelling story, and also it was just kind of forgettable, sadly. Like I think it's an important book, and I think this is a book that I wouldn't hesitate to give to a young person that wants to learn more about this time period, but for me, I think I would have liked to learn more about this time in history in a different way. And frankly, like I took a class on this period of time in college. So I guess for me, that's probably part of it too. It's like I already knew a lot of this stuff. And so for me, it didn't really feel, I would say as emotionally impactful, but yeah, this was just a 3-star read for me. Not bad, but definitely like not a 5-star read. Next up, we have Yes, and I Love You by Ronnie Lauren. Okay, this is a really weird one because I don't remember reading this book at all. Like I don't remember a single thing about this book. I looked up the Goodreads synopsis. It did not jog my memory whatsoever. But whenever I posted about this on Goodreads, a couple of people replied to me and said, hey, you've talked about this book in a video before, but no one could identify like what video that was. And so I looked and I searched, and I don't know. I don't know if I've read this book or not. Long story short, I did not pick up this book for this video. Have I read it before? I have no idea. Your guess is as good as mine. This one does have a main character with Tourette's, and I believe another character with ADHD, or maybe one character has both of those diagnoses, but apparently the representation's good. It's a book that exists. Will I attempt to read or reread this at some point so I can give you more in-depth thoughts and feelings? Perhaps. You know, I do own this book. I'm not planning on unhauling it. It's such a weird one. Like, if you remember me talking about this book, let me know, and I'll look at that video, but I don't remember. Next up, we do have another 5-star read. I think this might be, no, it's not the last of the 5-star reads. There's definitely other ones on this list, but we have A Heart and a Body in the World. This is a YA book that actually did work for me. This one deals heavily with gun violence, and I don't know how to define it necessarily, but the way that women sometimes feel obligated to attend to men, even if they are scared of those men or don't want anything to do with those men, right? Like the fear that something might happen to you if you don't treat everyone nicely was intense. This book is extremely intense, and it follows kind of the aftermath of the events that happened. We get flashbacks from our heroine's POV, kind of talking about her experiences with the guy that ended up opening fire on a party that she went to, and it is extremely hard to read, I won't lie. I knew this book was going to be rough. I knew it was going to be impactful. A lot of people said this was really, good. And when I was told what this book was about, I went into it kind of thinking I knew what it was going to be and that I wouldn't be as emotionally devastated. That was a lie. I definitely was. The way that this book is written and the way that it feels like this is something that could happen to you or me, I think makes it that much more like scary. Would highly recommend it if you were looking for a book like this. It's hard to imagine that anyone's like really looking for a book like this, but I do think this could be a great novel for someone in high school who to learn more about this stuff. Like, I feel like I would recommend this to my own child so they know kind of the warning signs to look for in their peers, and I would want my kid to know that like, hey, you don't have to be nice to everybody, because that was definitely an issue in this book. Like, that's the main issue in this book, and I don't know, it was really, really good. 5 stars, fantastic. Keeping it on my shelves for sure. 2 5-star reads back to back. I'm shocked, I'm surprised. We have The Lightning Struck Heart by TJ Klune. This is a book that I actually read for one of my, like, I was gonna say 5-star predictions videos, obviously. I did an I read 5-star predictions video where I took 5 of the books from this list and used that opportunity to read through them, and I really, really liked Lightning Struck Heart. This is a TJ Klune book that is indie published, and it is absolutely bizarre. It's whimsical, it's over the top. There are some issues with it for sure, but it is so fun. It's about a wizard, or like a wizard's apprentice and a knight, sort of semi-enemies to lovers, kind of a mutual pining thing, but they go on this adventure together with a whole host of friends, and it's just a whole lot of fun to read. They resist their feelings for each other for a decent amount of the book. It has a really satisfying ending. It definitely leaves you open to the rest of the series because it is a series of books, but it was just enjoyable. I think if you enjoy TJ Klune and you really enjoy some of TJ Klune's traditionally published stuff that has been published more recently, like The House in the Cerulean Sea, or is it Under the Whispering Door? If you like those, I think there's a good chance you might like this one. It definitely has less PG writing, shall we say, and more adult themes, but the overall feeling, the overall whimsy of this story definitely, I would say, translates into some of his traditionally published stuff. Like, you can definitely see where that transition happened and kind of like where he took his writing. I don't know. It's a really good book. I really recommend picking it up. I am curious to read more in the series in the future, and I feel like this is a book that I never hear talked about, so I'm kind of glad to like bring it to people's attention, but it was a lot of fun. Moving from a 5-star to a DNF, I ended up DNFing Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. I don't feel bad about it, to be honest. I don't know why I picked this up. I think I picked it up when I was in New York. I've only been to New York once, and I went to the Strand. I picked out a few different books, and frankly, like, none of those books were inside of my comfort zone. Some of them were queer books because I ended up going during Pride Month, I believe, and I was like, yeah, like I'll get some nice queer novels, some LGBT stuff. And I also picked up this one on a whim. I'm not really sure why. I had heard things about it, I guess, but just because I know what a book's about does not mean that I necessarily need to buy it. This one is about a flu-like pandemic. It's about this like traveling theater troupe and how they're trying to bring like joy, I guess, to people in these like dark days, and I don't really care, to be honest. I DNF'd this really early on. I didn't even get to the like traveling theater troupe part of it, but I just wasn't that intrigued by it. The reading experience on paper I didn't like. The audiobook listening experience I also didn't like, and so I decided, hey, I don't need to finish this book, you know? Just because you own it doesn't mean you need to finish it. For me, I think that is kind of like my takeaway from this video and just like some other stuff that I'm doing is just because I own a book doesn't mean I have to finish it all the way. As long as I've attempted the book and given it a fair shot, I feel pretty okay with it, right? Like, I don't have to finish everything, but you know, give it a try, give it a chance. This one I gave a chance and it just it blew that chance, okay? Next up, we have a 4-star read, An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. I always want to say John Green for some reason. I mean, he's the author, right? Typically. But this one, I think I put it on my 5-star predictions list, not really understanding what this book was and like the scope of the story. I feel like I knew the general synopsis and the general gist of the book, but I think that I was hoping that it would be more of a commentary on what it's like to be a social media influencer and less about the like fantasy elements, but they were definitely evenly mixed here. And I think that's kind of where I lost interest. I wasn't like totally sold, I would say, on the sci-fi fantasy elements of the story going into the book. I will say I was sold more as I continued to read, but I really wanted more of Hank's insight into what it's like to be on the internet for as long as he was, what it's like to experience that level of fame and that level of notoriety, I guess, because I think he has a lot to say about that topic. And I'm not saying that this was a bad vehicle for that storytelling or for that commentary, but I just wanted more of it. And so I think I was left just a little bit disappointed. And I also think I wanted more POVs in the story. I think that's something I pointed out whenever I vlogged this for that 5-star predictions video, but it was a fantastic book. I was surprised, maybe not surprised, but I was definitely impressed by Hank's writing style. I was unsure of what to expect, having read so much of John's stuff, but definitely different writing styles, but you can definitely see some similarities there. Like, they're definitely brothers. So I had a good time with this one. It was a 4-star, but I'd be interested to read the sequel, I think. Right, now getting into some books that I ended up reading fairly early on. Some of these books I read at the end of last year, so I guess like a year from now. So I don't know if like my thoughts and feelings are as fresh on some of these books, but we get into it and I'm going to try to let you know how I felt about some of these. So first up we have In My Dreams I Hold a Knife. This is kind of the book I would say that spurred my interest in making a 5-star predictions video in the first place. I knew it was a book that I really wanted to prioritize and wanted to read because I'd heard so much about it, especially from Kayla from Books and Lala, who I referenced in that last video. This one is about a group of friends who all attend this kind of like exclusive school in the South, I believe, and they're all going to a reunion and they're going to hang out and I think kind of discuss the suspicious circumstances surrounding one of their friends' deaths that happened on campus when they were all attending school together. And that sounded really juicy to me. I was really excited about it. It was giving dark academia vibes from the description of the book. So this one just kind of fell flat for me, sadly. I wanted to really like buy everything that the characters were telling me, but I couldn't. It mostly follows our main character, who's this like blonde girl who always felt a little bit inadequate, and so we get to see her kind of like try to be as cool as the other people around her, and it feels a little bit pathetic, I'm not gonna lie. In this case I didn't mind it so much. I know I've complained lately about how I don't really like pathetic female main characters, which I do stand by, but the circumstance I thought it was interesting to see how she kind of like grew her character as the years went on, how she went from someone who was trying to imitate people to being someone who could kind of stand on her own. I thought that was interesting, but I don't know, the mystery elements of the story were just like very, very lacking for me. It was kind of like, let's go down the list of each person in that friend group and kind of see where they were at the time of the crime and like what they could have done. And I didn't like the left to the last person, if that makes sense. It was like, let's go in order, and then the last person is who done it. It felt like predictable almost, and like I feel like I could kind of see who did it. It was just okay. Like, it was fine. I give it 3 stars. I feel like this might be a book that I want to revisit just because I don't know if I like fully appreciated it the first time I read it, but it was just okay. Another DNF, Courting Darkness by Miss Robin Lefevers. I really enjoyed the His Fair Assassin trilogy in high school. It was one of my favorite book series, I would say, when I was a senior. I liked, and I think this kind of like helped me transition into romance, I liked the angst and the tension between the heroes and heroines in those stories. There is like an HEA sort of like romantic element to all of the books, and some of them are like kind of hot and steamy. I mean, they're not like graphic or anything, but really was excited to read Courting Darkness because I love those books so much. It was related to that series. But I think that's the problem with Courting Darkness, and the reason I DNF'd it is because it relies so much on you knowing the characters from that first series and remembering the events of those books that I was just completely lost. Like, the last time I read these books was in 2013, nearly 10 years ago, and I didn't want to have to go back and read the entire trilogy to read this book. I think I'm okay with just owning the trilogy, to be honest. Like, I'm fine with just getting rid of this book, giving it back to the half-price books from whence it came. Next up, we have Middlegame by Seanan McGuire. This is another book that I read on the recommendation of Kayla. I know that this is one of her favorite books, and I was really excited for it to be one of my favorite books as well. I feel like we don't tend to have the same taste in books, and we definitely don't prefer the same genres, but some of Kayla's favorite books are books that I have given 5 stars to, so I don't know, I kind of expected this one to go well for me, especially since a lot of other people like it, but I actually gave this book 2 stars. It's a hard one to explain. It deals with 2 twins separated at birth, and they are supposed to, I don't know, do great things. It's a sci-fi book. I literally have no idea how to explain this book. I think my problem with this one was that I think it was supposed to be emotionally resonant and to get you to think of like ethics and morality, and I didn't feel that way. I honestly, like, I don't think this book had a lot to say. It felt a little bit shallow in that way. I didn't care about these characters at all, and beyond the twins separated at birth premise, like, I just literally didn't care. Disappointing for sure, especially since it was one of those books that I had on my shelf that I was like very much looking forward to reading, and I'm glad I read it because now I know that like I don't need it on my shelves and I can get rid of it. But I was kind of sad to know that this is not a book that I share in common with Kayla. I guess it's not a book that I also enjoy, sadly. Next up we have, I think, the last nonfiction book on this list, Hood Feminism by Mickey Kendall. This is a book that talks a little bit about Mickey's experiences as a Black woman with feminism, and that kind of covers the broader discussions, I guess you could say, on what it is to be a Black woman or a person of color in these spaces that seem to be really dominated by white women, and white women kind of just looking out for their own interests. I found it very illuminating, I will say. I initially, when I first started reading, I was like, okay, this is stuff that I feel like I kind of already knew. The studies and the facts that Mickey brings in to the book, along with her own experiences, I think just makes this book feel really rich. Like, not only am I getting the cold hard facts, but I'm also getting someone's experiences that's dealt with stuff like this and how it's impacted her specifically. I thought it was really fantastic. I think this is a book that a lot of people have read. I think this is a book that a lot of people could benefit from reading. And again, I like don't rate nonfiction, but if I did rate nonfiction, this would easily be a 5-star book. All right, 6 more to go. First up, we have The Day of the Duchess. This was a 2-star read for me, which is so disappointing because so many people that I really love and respect love this book. It's one of their favorite Sarah MacLean books. But another discovery that I made this year is that Sarah MacLean books just really are not for me. I think that her first book that I read, or like the first book I read by her, was kind of a fluke. I just haven't really liked any of her stuff since. But this book is about her main character. I want to say her name's like Serafina or something. Why I remember that, I don't know. And she is seeking a divorce from her husband, but her husband needs heirs. And even though they've been separated for a while, in terms of like they haven't lived with each other for quite a while, and Sarah's like, okay, well, we haven't been together for like this long. Obviously you don't want me, let's get a divorce. And he's like, no, like I don't want to get a divorce. I don't want to have to find a new wife. I need an heir. And she's like, okay. But she puts this idea forth that he should find a new wife, and he's like, okay, yeah, sure, like I'll do that, but you have to help me find one. And so she puts together like a whole host of women, and they all go, I believe, to like his country home or something, and he's supposed to get to know all of these women. Obviously, while he's there, he gets to know his own wife better and decides that he wants to stay with her forever. I just feel like it was too little too late. I don't really like books where couples are separated for long periods of time and they don't talk about why they're apart. Like, I enjoy a miscommunication trope, to be honest. I know a lot of people don't, but this particular kind of miscommunication trope, I think, gives miscommunication a bad name. I'm sorry, this dude sucked. He was the worst. He did not deserve the heroine. I feel like he could have done so much more to apologize to her and to kind of like kiss her feet, and I just feel like the things that he does at the end of the book to try to make up for the things that he's done, I'm just like, I don't really buy it. I'm not really into it. It did not feel swoony and romantic to me. I was just like very fed up with him. So next up, we have another historical romance, Much Ado About You by Eloisa James, and this is a book that I actually enjoyed. In some ways, it kind of reminds me of Little Women, and I do think the author was going for that with the story, and I think she did succeed. It's about, I believe, 3 sisters, and they are in kind of a tricky situation because their father has recently passed away and they don't really have a big fortune or anything. New caretaker, I guess, is a bit of a drunkard, and they need to get married off basically if they want to be able to survive. Like, they're living with a guy who can take care of them for the most part, but they're like, yeah, we don't really want to live with this guy forever. And at the beginning of the book, you don't really know who the heroine of the story is, if it's going to be like the older sister or the younger sister, because each of the girls kind of has their own romantic inclinations, and like definitely they're seeking men, right? Each of the books in the series is about a different girl, but this first book in the series definitely like lays out the personalities of each of the 3 girls, and you're like, who is this book about? Anyway, it is about the older sister of the 3. I think her name's like Annabelle or something like that, and she is in kind of a tough situation. She thought she was going to end up with this one guy, but he ends up kind of like running away from her, and she's trying to find him again and like see if he still wants to marry her. But in the meantime, she is being courted by a guy who's like definitely a rake, who she definitely shouldn't be associated with, but she can't seem to like shake him and meet him in like back corners and stuff, kind of messing around. She definitely doesn't think that he is a viable love interest until the end of the book, but I kind of liked it. I really liked the love interest. I think he is what made the story for me. I think Annabelle, she was okay. I like that she looked out for her sisters, but I'm actually more interested in the other girls' stories. That being said, I did like the way that they all kind of envisioned marriage and love differently. There is one girl who reminds me so much of Amy, which I think was fun. I don't know if I'd compare Annabelle to like a Jo. I think she's more of like a Meg or something like that, but It was a fun book. I gave it 3 stars. The audiobook is definitely the way to go with this book. Would I continue the series? Probably not, to be honest. I wasn't that invested, but it was a fun enough time, and I remember where I was when I was listening to this. I was actually going to my parents' new house for the first time, I believe. So yeah, it was a good book. It was fine. Next up, we have a middle grade book, actually 2 middle grade books in a row. Nevermoor by Jessica Townsend. I ended up giving this book 3 stars, which is sad because I'd heard so many good things about this book. And you know, I think if I were middle grade age, this might work better for me. I don't know. I just didn't really like how our main character is treated. I understand that that's like kind of the point of this book. It's about this young girl who is kind of blamed for everything that goes wrong in her town. And she finds out that that's actually not really her fault, that she has these special powers and that she needs to like go to this school or like enter into a competition. I honestly can't even remember the details, which is sad. I just think like this one was maybe too hyped for me is the problem. It wasn't bad again, but I just like the more middle grade that I read, the more that I'm like, love the whimsy of this, but I think I'd rather just read this with my kids when my kids are middle grade age. You know what I mean? Moving on to a middle grade that I did actually give 5 stars to though, and that was a little bit more standout, had kind of a similar plot. It was Amari and the Night Brothers. It's about our main character who is trying to figure out what happened to her brother who ends up going missing, and in doing so, she ends up entering into, again, this kind of like magical world, working for this like magical bureau of investigations, kind of. It was really fun. I just really liked Amari's character. I liked the, not message of the story, but I liked that she had a purpose, right? She like knew what she wanted to do. She wanted to find her brother, and she was also just like, she was kind of the chosen one in a lot of ways. I really liked this book, and I don't really know how to define like what I enjoyed about this one that I didn't really enjoy about Nevermoor. I just preferred it. I think if you're like looking for a good middle grade to read, or you're looking to get a middle grade book for someone in your life, like this is the one I would recommend of the couple that I've read this year. And then the last 2 books are both vampiric. Let's talk about the DNF first, so we can end it on a high note. Dark Prince by Christine Feehan. This is one that I purchased because I knew that J.R. Ward, I'm pretty sure, is really close friends with Christine Feehan, or in the past has been associated with her, and I feel like I've heard J.R. Ward say good things about her books, and I love J.R. Ward, you know? She also writes vampire novels, and so I was like, okay, I'm gonna pick this up. I love a good paranormal romance, and I just like kept putting it off, and I've had this book on my shelves for a couple years at this point. It was not very good, so I ended up DNFing it. I have never seen so many DNFs on my Goodreads amongst my friends than I have for this book. It's about this guy who's like a Carpathian, which is like kind of vampire, I think, and meets this woman, and I mean, I honestly couldn't tell you because I DNF'd this book, right? But it wasn't for me, and I don't know if I really want to pick up more from this author in the future. Oh, you know what? No, I actually did read another book by her. It was like a little a little novella. It was not good either, so I think I'm fine with like just not reading anything else from her in the future. Sorry, Christine Feehan. And then lastly, we have Fangs. This is the shortest book I think that I read all year. It is a graphic novel about a vampire and a werewolf and their romance, and it's just cute. It's like these little vignettes, these little like funny moments, kind of like puns you can make about like vampires and werewolves being together. Those are like kind of what form the story, and it's just cute. It was cute. It was enjoyable. It's not like the most rich storytelling. It's not the most in-depth book ever, but does it really need to be? Like I just had a fun time with this one, and I'm very glad that I read it. And it honestly kind of reminded me that I do like sequential art. I used to read a fair amount of webcomics, and then I just kind of stopped out of nowhere, and I kind of want to get back into it, honestly. Or just like pick up more graphic novels in 2023. So I do think this book taught me some things, along with just being generally enjoyable. So those are the 22 5-star predictions I had for 2022. Obviously, not all went to plan, but I'm glad to have any 5-star reads, honestly, from this list. In total, I ended up having 8 5-star reads out of the 22, and frankly, I'm like pretty happy with that. I would have been happy with just 5 5-star reads from this list. I'm a notoriously picky critic and hard to please, so to have like my predictions be decently accurate, I feel like, you know, pat on the back. I feel good about that, and I'm excited for 2023 and getting to read those 5-star predictions, especially since the majority of those are not books I physically own, but are just books I'm excited about. Again, like the reason I created this video in the first place, or the initial video, was that I wanted to read more of the books that I own, and so I only selected, you know, physical books that I own. For 2023, it's pretty much all romances, like my most anticipated romances, and I think that one will be fun to like revisit in 2023. But anyway, thanks so much for watching this video. Let me know if any of your like thoughts and feelings on these books differ from mine, or if this has encouraged you or discouraged you from reading any of these books. I would love to know. But thanks so much for watching this video. I love y'all so much, and until next time.